would love to welcome to the stage Jason White, Robert Mao, Adam Gehring, and Stephen Yu. And here's Corey.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. How's everyone doing? Woo! All right, it's a great pleasure for me to be here today along with a great panel of blockchain industry thought leaders. Thank you, Jonathan and team, for organizing this great, wonderful event. I'm Corey Huang, the CEO and co-founder of Stably. It's a stablecoin startup based here in the Pacific Northwest. And today we will be discussing the topic of when to use a token to power a dApp or decentralized application. So this is a very interesting topic because there are so many different possibilities on how to integrate tokens into decentralized application. And before we start, I'd like to give our panelists a chance to introduce themselves. So let's start from the right.
Hi, everybody. My name is Jason White. I oversee two different businesses at the crowdfunding website Indiegogo. One of those businesses is equity crowdfunding. So for the first time a couple of years ago, it became legal for companies to fundraise on sites like Indiegogo by offering securities, shares in their company, loan opportunities, revenue sharing opportunities, et cetera, to the crowd. And we do that in conjunction with a registered broker-dealer, so it's a very securities law forward exercise. And the other business that I oversee is token sales. So we use the same apparatus that we use to help companies fundraise with securities to help token sellers issue tokens to the crowd, fundraise with blockchain-based assets, and to do it in a way that is above board, white hat, and will hopefully keep them out of prison.
Hi, everyone. My name is Robert Mao. I'm a founder and the CEO of ArcBlock. What ArcBlock does is ArcBlock is a platform to help developers to develop and deploy decentralized apps. So basically, it's kind of like AWS, but for blockchain. So for any developers who want to build up their blockchain applications right now today, they have to facing a lot of problems. For example, what kind of blockchain technology to use? Should I use Ethereum? Should I use some EOS? And they also have facing the problem like today's blockchain are always very slow. And so what ArcBlock does is ArcBlock provided a few components. One of the components right now is already live today. It's called Open Chain Access Protocol. So basically, it's built on top of the technology of GraphQL. You can use GraphQL to access different type of the blockchains. Right now, we already supported Bitcoin and Ethereum. And the OCAP protocol is open, so basically the community can build together with different to support different kind of blockchains. So yeah, feel free to come to our website because there is something already live, and you can try yourself if you want to develop blockchain applications. Thanks.
I'm Adam Gehring, and I've been brainstorming about distributed applications ever since I saw The Matrix. And so for a very long time, long before Bitcoin. And so I like to do thought experiments on what kind of things you can build and look at the technologies that are being built here, like ArcChain, ArcBlock, Dragon Chain, all sorts of really interesting stuff, and see what can we build today and then kind of extrapolate that out. So I advise a lot of blockchain projects.
Hi, everyone. My name is Simon Yu. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Storm. So Storm is a blockchain company based in Seattle. We started in 2014. When Bitcoin wasn't cool. All the VCs thought we were money laundering or drug smuggling because of Silk Road and Mt. Gox. So, well, I got your attention, so thank you. Yeah. And so what we do is we reward users cryptocurrency by checking out and completing tasks. And this can be anything from doing some chores, doing programming work, or checking out products and services, doing surveys, and a lot of variety of things. And we put this in the blockchain. So we've rewarded over $2.68 million to users across 187 countries. And we work with 200 brands right now, including Airbnb, Uber, Amazon, Twitter, and a lot more. So.
All right, thank you everyone for the great introduction. Let's get into it. So the first question I have is, I thought this was going to be a simple question, but it's actually a little bit more complicated than you would think. What is a decentralized application?
I'll take that one. There's not actually a really clear definition of a decentralized application. A lot of people will define a decentralized application as applications running on the blockchain, like an entire set of Solidity contracts being fully decentralized.
May I have your attention, please? We are
And
experiencing power interruptions coming in from Seattle City Lake.
okay,
It's affecting the high-rise part of our building, so the high-rise elevators are out of service right now.
okay. The at, yeah. So everyone must stay here until I finish talking. That's awesome. So what I wanted to say.
City Lake into our building, the high-rise part of our building. High-rise elevators are out of service.
Sir, when did you that off?
Hope to have this resolved shortly. Let you know as soon as we find out more from Seattle City Lake.
So we can have decentralized talk. We need a decentralized.
All right.
We need to put them on the blockchain or something.
Exactly. So this is why you need user-owned software. So we could just do an improvement patch really quickly and solve that problem. But that's actually the definition of a decentralized application. I think is you've decentralized all aspects of the application, from its resources to its governance to its design to its economy and whatnot. So you don't have to build out these applications on top of any existing blockchain. You can build it on future blockchains. Bitcoin is a distributed application. You can just build it on top of open source software, Linux, peer-to-peer networking. You can have an application actually be its own blockchain. So there's a much more encompassing definition of distributed application. It's more about distribution and not about the platform you build it on.
Thank you. And what are the best use cases for decentralized applications that you have seen out there?
I can take this one. Yep. So yeah, I totally agree with you. So today the decentralized apps, there's no clear definition. So there's quite a bit of confusion that in the market that people might think I'm building a decentralized app, but actually it's just an app that is using blockchain. I would say that applications that just use the blockchain probably not necessary to be a decentralized app. So for example, for the Ethereum, probably one of the app website that everybody using a lot is the Etherscan, right? So the Etherscan itself is just like a typical website. The only interesting thing is connecting to the Ethereum, and actually I'm thinking it's indexing everything from the Ethereum to the database. It's actually a typical web app, but it is definitely a blockchain application, but is it decentralized? Probably not. Right? For me, I think the decentralized app, the most valuable thing from the decentralized app is be able to use a token to transfer the value between the future of the application itself. What does this mean? I think essentially, I think any kind of application is one of the protocol or a set of the protocol. Right? But in the old days, when we are doing that in the internet age, so the protocol itself is always free. For example, when we are using any web applications, it's actually built on top some kind of low-level physical protocols, and then on the IP, on the TCP, on the HTTP, but everything, all those protocols are free. The only one that captures the value is a service built on top, the very top of the service. For example, like the Facebook. Facebook is charging for the advertising, but it's built on the software that is completely free from the bottom up. So the Facebook captured most of the value, but many other persons, the folks who invented the IP protocol, who implemented the TCP protocol, probably they didn't make enough money. But the Facebook that built on top of the PHP make most of the money. The maybe PHP founder didn't make enough money too. So I think in the decentralized age, I think the things has been changed. That when people create different applications, we can set up a token. The token can transfer and can be represented the value of that part of the application. And a decentralized app means a bunch of apps can work together, and they can work together still as a protocol stacks. But other than the features that is powered by each of the stack of the protocol, they also have the token to kind of transmit the value and can divide the value automatically between different of those kind of decentralized apps. This is my understanding of the decentralized app and why it's valuable and how to use that.
Thank you.
I can probably talk about more of like a real life use case. So if you imagine Airbnb, for example, and so you have two parties. and you want to connect them together. Airbnb is in the middle for two main reasons. So one reason is because, one, there's a payments aspect. Do you really trust the other party that they're going to pay? And Airbnb ensures that there's some kind of security in that aspect because both sides can have trust because of Airbnb being in the middle. And the second part is the security part, because is this person actually trustworthy? Is the person that's going to be renting my house going to be a homeless person or someone that might ruin it or some party goer? And on the other side of it, if I pay to rent this house, will they actually let me in? And so this is where the marketplace model is really interesting for dApps because, one, from the payment side, you don't have to have Airbnb in the middle. Essentially, you can connect the two parties. And what you can do that through is through smart contracts. And so you have an escrow account in the smart contract. So you say, hey, this is for $500. We're going to put it in a smart contract. And if both parties are content, then you can say both parties content with check marks, and then you can release the funds. And if they're not content, then you can go to the governance model, and then you can allow a source of people or however the way that you set up, and you can have the masses or be able to decide, and you can give them a small reward or some sort of method to say that which party is actually right and have them dispute. And this way, you actually don't need Airbnb. You can actually get two parties to just make the transaction themselves. You don't need bank accounts. You don't need ACH transactions. All you need is the wallet accounts and just be able to send payments directly. And so you cut off the middleman. And so, it's definitely an interesting aspect.
I would just add, I think the nuance here is in what the definition of a dApp is. As Adam says, there isn't a commonly held a definition of it. In some cases, Adam, you've defined it as having decentralized governance and contribution to the project itself, potentially decentralization in how it's hosted, now or in the future, et cetera. But there are certainly a number of actors in the space who I believe define a dApp as being an application that is hosted on a blockchain. I certainly see many of those at Indiegogo. And if you take that as the definition, really the question, what are the benefits of a dApp, really amount to the same question, what are the benefits of building on the blockchain? And once you go to that question, there are numerous benefits as far as transparency and being able to build trust between counterparties. And in my view, there is virtually no industry that is not poised. It's a lot of double negatives. All industries are really poised to benefit just about from having applications on the blockchain. We've seen fascinating applications in healthcare, in marketplaces like Airbnb, in music, art creation, attribution, software development. There are virtually no industries that can't benefit from some implementation of the blockchain.
Wonderful. With that said, what are the top challenges facing decentralized applications that you've seen out there?
I'm happy to start that. From my vantage point at Indiegogo, I see everything largely from a financing lens. So at Indiegogo, when we launched our token sale platform in late 2017, we were very fortunate. We got a lot of press. The New York Times wrote a very flattering article about what we were doing following 10 years of crowdfunding. And from that moment, we were bombarded by companies large and small looking to fundraise. Many of them dApps, not all of them, but many of them at least self-described as dApps. And the issue from where we sit at Indiegogo is one of regulatory. As has been discussed, to have a dApp, there is an opportunity/need for tokenization. There is a notion of incentivizing all of the various actors in an ecosystem to do something, whether it's contributors to a project, customers of the dApp, contributors, et cetera. And that token model is integral to making the entire ecosystem work. The challenge, at least in the United States, is that the framework really is not fully baked at this point to enable all of the various implementations that could be quite advantageous to the ecosystem to a given project. And so figuring out how you do that, for example, in a dApp where the stakeholders may just be business users, but a token offering may actually become eligible for retail participation, there become all kinds of securities-related questions around how much, if any, utility actually amounts in those tokens, and other kinds of hairy conversations arise. So I think it's a regulatory challenge to start.
I think Jason just addressed a very important part. From the other part, I think from the engineering point of view, I think the dApp today is just that there's not enough platform that is ready yet. So a lot of people are really interested in building dApps, but when they really try to build something, they will find that there's parts missing here and there. And there's too many, sometimes there's too many wheels to use, sometimes there's too less to use. And the other part is when they eventually build some kind of dApps. For example, if you are trying to build something from Ethereum, it's very easy to just clone from an example and get something running. However, if you really want to build your demo apps, try to put it online on the internet, it consumes a lot of resource. For example, you have at least have a Ethereum full node to work together with you. So that's cost a lot of money and it costs a lot of time to set it up. It's just, I think it's just the infrastructure is basically like very early days in the internet right now. So that's exactly one of the part that our blog is trying to addressing. We're trying to build in some kind of platform to help the developers to don't worry about too much about the details and to just focus on the idea and build something. So I think the whole dApp ecosystem need a lot of people to work together to solve the problem today.
So if you imagine that software that's open source but owned by its users and is able to pay its users, is able to pay its developers, it's able to pay all the pay its own resources. Basically, Bitcoin was the first open source software that actually implemented economics. And so you can imagine software that's fully decentralized, not owned by anyone. That software cannot do a token sale on Indiegogo. That software cannot get in the Apple Store. There's nobody to represent that software except its users, because that's the way it's designed. There's no central authority. And so that's actually one of the hindrances to truly decentralized applications. And that's a legal problem. The closest thing you can get right now is setting up a foundation. So you set up an open source foundation similar to like the Ethereum Foundation, the Tezos Foundation, the EOS Foundation. You say, this is software, I wrote it, I'm not responsible for it. We just kind of organize cats, and the cats are the developers, and we just kind of give them direction, but we're not responsible for the software. And actually, Apple doesn't allow most applications that use that model to be published in the App Store. And so Apple decides what your software is allowed to do. And that's one of the big challenges, I think, in distributed applications right now. Simon's run into this with the Apple Store. Apple Store says exactly what crypto applications can and can't do. And so there's all sorts of things that, the users might want it, but they can't get it published. And so until there's like an open source distribution from the top down in the stack, as long as there's commercial companies in the middle of the stack like Apple and Google, that's a challenge to fully distributed applications.
I think there's three things from our side, from having run a company in this exact situation. There's so user experience, scalability, and regulation. So user experience, part of what Adam was touching about too, you are reliant on kind of centralized parties like Google Play or Apple's iOS Store, or AWS that kind of judges what you can and can't do. But then there's also, right now, it's like you have tokens, but it's really cool and it might be effective, but you still need exchanges in order to convert it to fiat. And one of the biggest issues is a lot of the exchanges don't support US dollar pairs or direct conversion. So you'll have to go through maybe a place that has different altcoins like Bittrex or Binance, and then you have to send it to Gemini, and then Coinbase, and then you have to convert it to US dollar, right? So the ideal situation is, hey, we're going to be able to send it directly from wallet to wallet, but right now there's too many intermediaries that happen. So trying to explain that to, a soccer mom or some fraternity student that doesn't care about technology, it's really tough to get mass adoption. And the second part is scalability with Ethereum, with a lot of the token companies running on the URC network. It does about 15 transactions per second, where Visa or MasterCard does tens of thousands. And until we get to that state, it's really expensive to have every single transaction in the smart contracts, because it'll cost you several dollars for one transaction. For example, when CryptoKitties or Fcoin or something like that just clogged up the Ethereum network all of a sudden. And then going back to Jason's point on regulation, I think one of the most challenging parts as a U.S. company is there's so many different regulations and different bodies. So you have to go through SEC that's trying to regulate. You have to also go through FINRA. You have to also go through the IRS. You have to go through the CFTC. And every single one of these bodies has a different opinion, and you're trying to figure out what is the right decision. And until they can come to kind of one consensus and say that this is good. And right now, U.S. is tough because even for money transmission licenses, there is a debate, and there was actually a great panel last month by the Washington State DFI department, and you need a state-by-state level. And right now, the easiest way to get the state-by-state is they have one of these groups for getting accepted in 13 states together, but it doesn't include the rest of the 37 states. So not only do you need money transmission laws on the federal level, you need to get 50 different state levels, and that, from a startup and company, is just it's another bottleneck that you have to try to combat against, and with all this other stuff of running a company. But then in countries like Singapore or Korea and some other countries that are more flexible and are open to adopt this, it's a little bit easier in terms of that aspect.
Thank you. So let's move over to question and answers from the audience. If anyone has any question for members of the panel here.
I have a question from Twitter. So it's well known that many dApps do not need their own token, but this is not stopping anyone. What will stop this? Regulation, more awareness for investors, a combination of things, or is there a need for it to stop because there is demand? And that's from Crypto Dragon. So far, our only person posing questions, and he gets airtime.
From my vantage point, I think so. Go ahead. Not all dApps require their own token. So what will stop all of them essentially from attempting to create / circulate / disseminate their own token? I see a minimum of two factors. One of them is regulatory, as we've discussed. Already under the current framework in the United States, there are many decentralized apps that cannot issue a token, at least as defined when we see them. We at Indiegogo, we ultimately, in our vetting process, select about 1% of the token projects that make it into our funnel. And in many cases, it's because they're not regulatory compliant. So that automatically gives a deep haircut to a lot of these token generation projects. The other thing is the free market. At the end of the day, when a dApp creates a token and intends to hang that out as an incentive for investment or participation in a given project, that either is or isn't going to be incentivizing. And in many cases, as we see more and more of these tokens make it into the market, thousands by the thousands, there is going to be a shoring up of interest, both on the part of investors, software developers who are expected to contribute to things, customers, et cetera. So the free market should provide some sort of inherent constraint.
Yeah, so as I conclude our panel discussion, I'd like to leave the audience with a question to think about. So what use case for using tokens to power dApps do you think will gain the most adoption in the next 5 years? So which use case for using tokens to power dApps do you think will gain the most adoption in the next 5 years? And with that said, thank you everyone for listening.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. That was a great panel.